Mexico was called New Spain when it was created. The territory covers from Guatemala to California, including Florida, Cuba, and some other countries. Today, Mexico is a population of very few Peninsulares and Creoles, but many mestizos and indigenous. As of now, Mexico is in a very poor economic state due to the economical crisis and the very poor population. The constitution has changed since the independence, and Mexico is considered to be a constitutional republic.
The movement for independence in Mexico dates back to when Spain invaded and settled in the Aztec and Inca empires of North and South America. The independence movement was propelled by centuries of oppression and the need for a colonial government. The French Revolution and Napoleon's conquest of Spain led Mexicans of all classes to feel dissatisfied and angered at the government. When Napoleon invaded Spain and put his brother on the throne, this created an opportunity for enlightened Mexicans to promote independence since they believed that Napoleon's brother was not a legitimate king.
The event most agreed upon as the start of the Mexican War of Independence is the Grito de Dolores on September 15, 1810, where Padre Hidalgo called for Mexicans to rise against the Spanish Peninsulares and take revenge upon them for their oppression. In response, a large army of Native Americans and Mexican citizens rose up and killed any Spaniard who resisted them. By October 30, 1810, they encountered Royal Spanish forces outside Mexico City and were unable to take the city, despite their victories. Hidalgo was captured and executed on July 31, 1810. After Hidalgo's death, Padre José María Morelos took command of rebel forces. For the next several years, between 1810 and 1821, the rebels fought in isolated guerrilla bands against the Spanish in Puebla, commanded by Manuel Felix Fernandez, and in Oaxaca, commanded by Vicente Herrero. But Spanish military resistance stiffened, and in 1820, Viceroy Juan Luis sent an army commanded by Creole officer Agustin de Iturbide into Oaxaca, where he defeated guerrillas' irregular army. But while this was happening, the Spanish monarchy had just been subject to a coup d'etat and signed a liberal constitution with plans for power changes in New Spain. Fearing for the sake of conservative Creole values, Iturbide switched sides and joined the rebels against the Spanish. This was the final nail in the coffin of Spain's hold over Mexico. Iturbide managed to convince many of the rebels to fight for conservative Creole values, such as equal rights for the Creoles and Peninsulares in Mexico, and to be governed by a monarch independent from Spain. He also promised the Catholic Church privileges and a nice supply of power. Seeing there is no other options, Viceroy Juan Luis abdicated his position. The Treaty of Cordoba was signed on the 27th of September 1821 between Spain and Mexico, where Spain officially recognized Mexico's independence.
After centuries of oppression, a respected Catholic priest, Miguel Hidalgo, led the revolt for Mexican independence. The initial uprising was a clash between the lower social class of Indians and mestizos and the privileged Spanish descent Peninsulares. After generations of exploitation and oppression, Hidalgo's message was for the lower class to retaliate against the upper class. He encouraged the lower class Mexicans to recover their land that was stolen from their relatives.
The French Revolution, and by default the Enlightenment, didn't have a tremendous direct role in the Mexican War of Independence, but they did set the ball rolling for some of the events leading up to the Revolution. The Mexican people didn't rally behind the Enlightenment exclusively like the French people did in the French Revolution. The opportunity for independence presented itself when Napoleon Bonaparte invaded Spain and deposed the Spanish king Ferdinand VII, and appointed his brother, Joseph Bonaparte, as king of Spain. The Mexican independence fighters saw this as an opportunity to break away from Spain. While actual fighting didn't begin until 1810, the idea of a French king on the Spanish throne didn't sit well with both Spanish Peninsulares and Mexican Creoles and the citizens of New Spain. The American Revolution to the north had concluded 27 years before the events of the Mexican Revolution, and had little direct influence on the fighting in Mexico, other than giving some ideas of revolution. Many ideas that the American Revolution had filtered through into Mexico since the creation of the United States. The underlying ideology of the Mexican Revolution was independence from a foreign power, and originally it was equality for all, but eventually shifted for equality for Creoles and Peninsulars.
Mexico has still some Spain today. Many of the buildings in the city are buildings that were built when the Spanish had a colony there. Many of the traditions are also Spanish, such as the famous bullfights, but overall Mexico is a country that is very separated from its original colony. Mexico did not only inherit some festivals from Spain, but also took some ideas from France, for example, the separation of church and state. Mexico has also taken inspiration from the U.S. executive and judicial branches. Those two branches of the government are very similar to the Mexicans. Another thing that Mexico inherited from the U.S. was music. So ladies and gentlemen, I present to you Miguel Bosé.
No sé qué está pasando, que todo está al revés, que tú ya no me besas tal como ayer. Y anoche en la playa no me dejaste amarte, algo entre nosotros